Hello, and welcome to another episode of Ready.Set.Midmarket, the podcast for all things mid-market IT. I'm Adam Dennison, Vice President of Midsize Enterprise Services with the Channel Company. And with me is my co-host, Samara Lynn, Senior Editor of MES Computing. Welcome, Samara. And today our guest is Ali Molavi. He is the Infrastructure Solutions Architect and Team Lead with Publix Employees Federal Credit Union. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So today's podcast, from a topic standpoint, is going to be around infrastructure modernization. We're also going to talk about a move from VMware to a hybrid cloud environment. But before we do get into that, Ollie, why don't you talk a little bit about, tell us who you are, what organization you represent, and a little bit about your organization overall.
Sure. My name is Ali Molavi. Joined Publix Employee Federal Credit Union. We call it PEFCU. In 2023, as a solution architect, I've been in IT since I was 16. I haven't done anything else. And most of my career, I worked for financial institution, credit union, and banks. Other type of like a financial institution, like the software development and rest of them. Mostly, I work for infrastructure design, engineering, and management and maintenance of those areas.
Thank you so much. So let's get into the topic a little bit, and before we do that, I want to just set the stage a little bit, because again, this is a migration from VMware, and it's something that we've had our thumb on the pulse of this for a couple of years now at MES. We partner with Gartner. We do our state of the mid-market research with them twice a year. Just a couple stats I want to share that we received from our most recent State of the Mid-Market Spring study before we get into your particular case study here, Ali. 62% of our mid-market respondents are currently running in a hybrid infrastructure. So that is up year over year from what we've been seeing. Top two benefits around that. Number one is cost, and followed closely behind that is better alignment between technology and business needs. And then the final stat that I'll share before we get into your particular instance here, 50% of our respondents right now have or are actively pursuing VMware alternatives. So that's definitely been something that's been a hot topic for, I think, over about 2 years now. We're still looking at it, hearing different instances around various CIOs and verticals and what they're doing. But let's talk about your particular case study here. What made you make this move to a hybrid cloud environment, modernizing your infrastructure? What were sort of those kind of key pillars behind that, and how did you go about that?
So, let's just go a little bit back when I joined to PEFCU. I think I was lucky I joined in a good time. It was a time for lots of hardware refreshment. And when I joined, instead of just looking at changing or replacing the hardware, going box by box, I was just trying to see what can we do better. And it was a lots of factor involved. Before we do it over like the server infrastructure, we have done some of modernization over the network, converting everything to SD-WAN, prep the infrastructure to going to 100% hybrid server environment. And then I was looking at different solutions. Just as a background, we had 2 data centers owned by a company in east part and west side of Florida. And the concept behind that was there was a lower chance if both sides get hit at the same time by hurricane. Florida is very famous for the hurricane. During hurricane season, at least we have 1 or 2 direct hits. But that changed because 2023 and also 2024, and I think 2021, we had hurricane hitting the west parts of Florida, coming from Tampa all the way to Daytona Beach and hitting both way at the same time. So we were looking at different options, maybe having 2 data center, maybe moving one of the data center completely out of Florida. And I came up I checked different assess different technology, different vendors. And one of the things I find out, and that was one of the reason I went to Azure, we have lots of partnership with Microsoft. And at the same time, like, this is like Azure is like our preferred partner by most of the vendor. So the Azure local, that time they call it Azure Stack HCI, come under my radar. And I start researching and designing everything based on one data center and using Azure as our like a DR site. And this is like not just, converting from like VMware to like Azure Stack or Azure Local. It was like more redesigning the data center, where data sit, how the DR works, and everything in those nature. So technically, I consolidate two data center in one, and then we start using Azure as our main DR site. This project was like some of the feature that was coming out from Microsoft. The time that I was doing this was so new, and like some of the feature I was using like the preview mode, or like more like a beta tester, like Azure Migrate for Azure Local was that time was not available for public. And I was the first person using it over the WAN. And it was very like, it was a very good experience for both me and also Microsoft team. I was closely working with their dev team to make sure, they have this like a live experience and data, because this is like something that, migration over WAN didn't happen for Azure Local in those testing. But it was a very good experience, and like just migrating from VMware to another solution, it's not easy. But what we have done was like moving from like two data center at least like 100 miles away over the WAN to the new data center with minimum downtime. And that was the reason the Microsoft like very interested for actually doing that case study, because it was not just about conversion, it was like redesign from scratch and relocation as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you about the environmental piece of this and the location of Florida. I have family that lives in Florida. We happen to have our MES fall event in Tampa literally days before one of the major hurricanes hit. Several of our employees and our MES customers were affected and impacted. Was this decision from the environment standpoint, was it as a result of an impact, or was it more preparedness and I see what's happening here and we need to get out ahead of this?
No, it was like more for paper, because like, since we already had two data center, you can be lucky once or twice. There is no chance you're going to be lucky the third time. And other things I learned, this is like in case of disaster, many times you're thinking about the power, you're thinking about other type of infrastructure, which is like under your control, but sometimes like connection, it's out of your control. Like we had situation in Jacksonville when I was working for another company. Like 3 days after hurricane, half of like city connection went down because they ran out of gasoline, and they're like, the generator went out of the gas, and they couldn't handle any more like the traffic. So you think, everything has a backup, but sometimes things happen is out of the control. And going to like a hybrid gave us this opportunity to have, if I want to go one step back, we could not move everything to the cloud. There are lots of requirements from vendors, from latency, from cost to move everything to the cloud. But we were looking more, I specifically looking more as for the cloud as like a DR plan.
Hmm. Okay. Um, so talk to us a little bit about, are we now complete with the migration? I know nothing's ever complete. The things are still always ongoing. But where are you at as far as look at a football field, from receiving the kickoff to goal line? Where are you in terms of that? And then, how are you measuring success around this, both from a cost standpoint and a business standpoint?
So, like the main project for moving our main application was done like a year ago. I think much like by February of 2025, everything was moved. We had some like older application we couldn't move, and they were like a part of like a life cycling to convert them to the more SASE solution, which All of them are done. Like Jacksonville data center, we decommit completely back in June 2025, and the other data center in Lakeland, which is in our headquarters, is almost done. We have some equipment left just for like compliance as far as like data retention, but we don't have anything left. As far as the cost, what you mentioned, it's like very interesting because in the past in this company we had our own data center.
Hmm.
I came from like environment that I prefer to outsource as much as I can. If this is not my main business, I don't want to learn it. And that's what I did here. You know, we started looking around to find data center with colocation. So we partner with Hostime for our colocation facility. And we just actually like compact everything in one rack. So our entire environment is just a little bit less than a rack. And as far as the cost, there was a lots of saving happened. One was mainly was VMware licensing, which was about like 35K that time. I'm 100% sure if we have it now, we have to pay more. And also, like the Azure local is the hyper-converged solution, which means it doesn't need the SAN storage. And for our environment, we could just use the hyper-converged part using the same sort of a storage provided by Azure. They are like, and as I said, like, we become too big data center, all of the cost. Some of those I cannot say, like, all of the maintenance fee for generator, UPS, all other stuff. But hardware costs, I think one time our CPA told me we were paying about like 200, 300K per year for all the maintenance for hardware and everything. But just giving you one shot, I think the entire cost for hardware side for this project was about like less than 50K per year.
But are you able to reinvest that, or do you have to give that back to the business?
The amount of saving we had with just modernizing everything, and it's not just like I didn't sacrifice the performance or quality, and actually it went up. Like our uptime and everything is much better compared to the past. The amount of think, this is just one area. Like as I mentioned, like what my first project was converting all of our traditional connection to SD-WAN solution. That alone saved us about 30K per month. We have more redundancy and more bandwidth compared to when we paid more. But this is just more the design and more about like renovation and thinking a little bit out of the box, not just go based on like, replacing the box with the box, replacing the hardware with the hardware, replacing the router with the router. So it was like a lots of change as far as the design. But I have to say that I had a very good leader.
Tell 10 grand a month and then go reinvest in some good stuff.
Did you work with the CIO or CFO?
We have CFO at this point. We are all reporting to CFO, our IT department.
Oh, okay. That's good. I just want to jump in for a second. That cost savings in hardware is pretty astounding. Was the VMware licensing price hike, was that a big factor in switching over? And before you moved to Microsoft, did you look at any alternatives besides Microsoft?
So I can say that was like the time that I start this project. It was a lots of uncertainty about VMware if the transition didn't happen yet. So it was a factor, but not 100%. But as far as like looking at other vendors, I was lucky to redesign at least three more environment in the past. So I was familiar with other vendors, but the things that Microsoft Azure and especially Azure Local, attract me because two, three things I had in my mind. One is reducing the number of vendors. And I already know I have to deal with Microsoft. I already know I have to deal with Azure. So that was like one of the main factor. And another thing was simplicity. One things I learned back after 2020, especially after COVID, is try to design more simple. The two reason is one, finding the right skill and finding the right people to work it's hard. And when you have like a more simpler environment, it's easier to onboard engineer. And if I make things simpler, then, the other part is easier and I don't need to worry about like finding a right skill anymore.
What does that look like right now? You just brought up the talent gap, skills gap. That's something that's been talked about for 20 years in IT. And I like that you've been through some of the pain, right? So let's simplify things so I can have a broader pool of folks. Talk to us a little bit about what that looks like right now in your industry, in your vertical, in Florida. Do you try to hire local? Do you hire remote? And what's that skills gap look like right now for you in the infrastructure space?
So, like, we try to hire from Florida, and like in all of my past jobs, one of the things I mentioned in the first, like, I try to outsource a lot and I try to make my team smaller. And especially like for mid-size, this is what I find out is like very important. You have like a smaller team, but, expert in multi area. And, I don't want, this is like another point is, many stuff you don't need to be expert. If this is you're dealing with like once or twice in like 4 or 5 years, it's better to just outsource it. Like I'm talking about my team. Like at this point, the entire infrastructure for our company with about like 300 employees, like 3 people. The core infrastructure, I'm not talking about the help desk. And this is just me, like one network engineer and one system engineer. So this is like, this is like some of the area we have to make sure we can cover each other. And especially like as far as the skills, if it's easier, then you can teach them and they can cover for other.
Do you see that the vendor community at large is helping in that regard? Take Microsoft out of it, because you have all these new players that are coming up. A lot. We had probably 20 new sponsors at MES 2 weeks ago in Houston. Are they coming in here with a simplified message for folks like you and your peers? Or are they coming in here with, I've got this incredible new technology, but man, is it going to take a lot from a ramp up time to learn this? What are you in general kind of seeing out there as far as the vendors being on board with that strategy?
I have a background for design, but I have never seen like a good solution. Someone coming to us and say, okay, this is a solution I have. These are like what you are gaining. These are what you are losing. And at the end of the day, this is how your environment looks like. I haven't seen that, to be honest. But going back to another question, yeah, for like project based or very isolated like staff, yeah, I see lots of MSP, but not overall. Because as I said, like, this entire project was not just like replacing the hardware or coming from VMware to Azure local. I'm talking about like, if someone look at the entire environment and bring like a comprehensive like a report or suggestion, this is what you can do, this is like, how you should look like if you want to do the modernization. No, I haven't seen that. But I think for other parts, like, if you just have like a very isolated scope, there is a lots of vendor and I use some of them from MES that was very helpful.
Thank you. Samara, do you have any final questions before we wrap?
I know we're running out of time, but I got one geeky question for y'all. I love the case study, which was really cool. And I noticed at one point it said that you guys migrated 120 virtual machines and 30 terabytes of data over like a 500 meg bandwidth WAN. And you kept the downtime under 10 minutes per VM. How did you do that?
So it's like Azure. Actually, this is like one of the tools that at that time was like more in preview. Azure Migrate. At this point, it's like for public, so everyone can use it. And this is like a very cool product that helps to migrate from VMware to Azure. And we had like, if I want to go one step back, we needed to retain the IP address. So technically, we need to move the VM as is from one environment to another environment. It is a little bit difficult. I have to go a little bit in the technical term because imagine you have the VM running in one network in Lakeland and you have to move that VM to Orlando, our main data center, and keep the same IP address. So it was like a little bit challenging because you don't just have one VM in one network. There is like 20, 30 in each network. So moving all of them together, or you have to have a split for a like sometimes, which is not good because then you have latency and all other issue. But with Azure Migrate, and again, these are like production VM. Data in each VM change every second. So the Azure Migrate has this feature. You replicate it from location A to location B, and whenever you are ready, you just say, I want to move it now, and it just take the last like change, the delta change, send it over there, and then you can turn on the machine in the new location, or from VMware move to the Azure local, and you have all of the recent data. So that 10 minutes that I was talking, it was like, and this is like a very cool feature. It was not available till 2020. I think starting 2025, it's available for public, which made the migration much, much easier and much, much like more efficient for us. And it's like a free tool. So it doesn't cost anything. Like when you said about the vendors, it was very interesting because I came to MES Orlando in April of 2024. I was like a visitor. I wasn't attending, but I wanted to come to the booths, and actually meeting Juniper in one of your booths saved me about 40K.
This is fantastic.
I don't remember the name of the rep. I'm not kidding because I was like looking around and for like a solution, because as a part of this hyper converge, we needed to purchase like a switches, and Juniper was on my radar. And when I saw this is like happening, I asked your colleague, I said, can I just come over there as a visitor? And I made it. I spent like around 2 hours, and I met the Juniper guy, and I said like, this is what I want. And he just told me, go to this vendor, go to this guy. And then like the price went down.
So thank you for sharing that. So my final question is, others that are out there looking to take advantage of what you've again, nothing's ever complete in IT, but what you've completed, what's the first steps that they should
First step, I would say, beside of the assessment, first step is they have to make sure the culture in IT is ready to accept this big change. Yes, there is a lot of good things I can say about Azure Local, but the technology is totally different from VMware. That's like the point. No one likes the change unless you are ready, and I think that's the main point. The lesson, I would say, like, the culture is very important to accept the change and ready to make the change.
That's a great point. And in my 20 plus years, that's something we never hear with varying, right? Culture's what matters most. Absolutely. So we are at the end of our time. Ali, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story and going into detail with us. Thank you for attending and buying from our MES sponsors as well. That's fantastic. Samara, thanks again for another solid episode. And we'll see you, the audience, again soon on the next episode of Ready, Set, Mid-Market.
Thank you. Thank you so much.